Paint Care is all about keeping it simple for district residents. They make recycling leftover paint easy with convenient locations like your local paint store. Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter and reducing waste. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up what's left. And 3, recycle the rest. Visit paintcare.org/3simplerules to learn more, or find a paint drop-off site near you.
Today on CityCast DC, we've got a zoning battle in Georgetown over bagels. We've got a copy of the sports economic study that the district sort of released. And we all have to find a way to survive the heat wave that is crushing the city. To talk about all of it, I'm here with ANC member Topher Matthews and the Washington Post's Michael Bryce Sadler. Today is Friday, June 21st. I'm interim executive producer Julia Karen, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, y'all. How you doing?
Great.
What's going on?
Cool. All right. So I feel like in classic DC tradition, hating on Call Your Mother is kind of par for the course. You either really like it or you kind of dislike it. I will admit I'm in the middle of the road, but apparently the residents of Georgetown really dislike it. Topher, can you kind of explain what's going on here?
Well, it's funny. I would actually dispute one part of that being
Sure.
I don't think all the residents hate it. I think there is a small group of people that are in the immediate proximity of the shop that are not as much fans of it being in their immediate proximity. They probably like the shop too, and they repeatedly say they'd love to see it on M or Wisconsin. So I think it's still widely popular. The question is whether it can continue to exist exactly at 35th and O, which we'll see.
Yeah. And so that building is in obviously like a more kind of residential area. Right now, Call Your Mother is zoned to be there. But I know that there was some like 7-hour long meeting about them being at that location. Were you there? And if so, can you break that down for us?
It was virtual, so no one was really there. I did watch a good chunk of it. You know, you mentioned that it is residential, but that's the tricky part about it, is that it is zoned residential. But that building has operated commercially, either as a grocery store or an antique store or flower shop, and then most recently as a bagel shop, literally since before the Civil War, since well before there were zoning laws to say that it wasn't allowed. So the way it works is that if you have that activity before the zoning laws kick in, you can keep doing it. But then if you want to change it and do something different, such as going from being a flower shop to being a bagel shop, you need zoning approval, which they actually got in 2020 after a bit of a fight. The issue is that those same neighbors we were just talking about that are not as happy about it being in that immediate proximity brought it to court and got the 2020 zoning approval thrown out. And so they had to go back and basically check a different box again. And that's what they're doing now. And that's what the 7-hour zoning hearing was about. And it's not over yet because they have to come back in September and finish the job.
I feel like zoning, every time we talk about it, it's like the sexiest and least sexiest thing that we talk on the show because it governs like so much of how we live and what we do. But the meetings regarding it, I feel like don't go to Real Housewives of like Potomac or whatever levels of like intrigue. Although wasn't there a woman who supposedly like had a trash bag of rats that she disposed of? Like,
so
confused.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of trash bags of rats in Real Housewives of the Potomac. I don't follow up on that show very much. But so I'd say the main opponent of the shop, Melinda Roth, the Call Your Mother attorneys presented a video that showed her leaving her house and putting trash into the public trash cans with the accusation that she was then going to turn around and blame that on Call Your Mother. She then jumped in and says, no, actually, there was a bag of rats, as one happens to have, that she said. I don't know if she explicitly blamed the rats on Call Your Mother in that particular bag of rats, but, you know, it can get a little tawdry. My biggest feeling watching it was seeing the chairman, Fred Hill, and thinking as a DC taxpayer, there's no way we pay him enough to go through this. I don't know what he gets paid, but it's not enough. He has an enormous amount of patience and endurance to make his way through that. So That was my overall take.
Yeah, that's definitely wild. I mean, I don't know, Michael, like we both kind of live more in the center of the city. And I feel like some of these arguments come up, but not as explicitly when we're talking about like zoning, et cetera. Like, again, I live right near Connecticut Avenue where the Vace Pizza is. And like, there's an alley there. There are rats. If I come off the metro, I'm seeing them. I don't know. How do you feel generally about one of these zoning issues in this neighborhood?
I mean, I think I said it last time I was on. We were talking about the cat
Yes.
that had gone missing. It just feels like one of those kind of quintessential DC stories. I mean, the shop itself is very iconic. You can't miss it if you go to Georgetown. But I think it's been mostly fascinating for me to hear the different arguments neighbors have presented for and against it. Some are like, who cares? Just let the people enjoy things. Others are like, look, I want to be able to access my front porch without someone sitting on it. And I think the complaints about trash and rats are valid, but I do wonder what is a middle ground solution that can make everyone happy. I was trying to think what that would be, and I didn't come up with an elegant solution. It sounded like, Topher, maybe you were thinking a relocation would be appropriate.
No, I mean, no, that is what the immediate neighbors would like to see. As I mentioned, I'm on the ANC. We actually passed a resolution in June that said two things. We supported part of the zoning application, which was a variance that would allow them to operate as a corner store, which was actually the variance they got in 2020. But then they needed to get another level of approval that they didn't get in 2020, which was a special exception to then sell prepared food, i.e. bagels, sandwiches, as a corner store. That one we said, the ANC, and I voted in favor of this resolution saying that we couldn't support it at this time. We think that there's, as Michael, as you said, I think there's probably more that can be done to alleviate the complaints, is my personal position. I think they could make some changes on the interior of the shop to add more interior seating. I mean, there's like maybe one or two seats inside. It's a small footprint. There's only so much they can do, but they can maybe do something. I would like to see them be a little more creative on that. One other idea I've sort of been kicking around would be something similar to nightclubs often get this thing called reimbursable detail, where essentially an off-duty police officer just manages crowds when there's a lot of crowds outside of an establishment. And because that seemed to be a big complaint from the neighbors, being that someone sits on your stoop, you can, calling brother can have an employee out there in a pink shirt and say, please get off the stoop. And most people would agree, but some aren't. But if a cop does it, well, I think people might react a little differently. And, I just think that could add a little more feeling of regulation of the crowds, and that they're not getting too much there, and the people that have their stoops being sat on might feel a little better. They probably still won't be that happy about it, but I'm just trying to kick around some ideas because, it will come up again in September, and I would like to be able to support it. And so I'm hoping we can make some progress over the summer to come up with some ideas.
Yeah, I was going to say, if they rearrange their seating inside the physical store, does that require some flavor of board approval, or is that just like the footprint of the building is the building and that's the way you can use it once it's set?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of boards that have a lot of power. If they built an entire new wing to the building, that would have to go to our old friends, the old Georgetown board. If all they're doing is moving tables around, maybe changing the operations inside, I can't imagine that would require that much boards, but I'm sure there's some, just like the gas station advisory board, maybe there's some bagel shop advisory board that needs to chime in. I don't know everything yet.
Listen, I feel like as someone who would have a chair on the bagel advisory board, it's something I could get behind. It's time for everyone's favorite summer festival. This year's Smithsonian Folklife Festival theme is Indigenous Voices of the Americas, and it will celebrate the National Museum of the American Indian. There will be 6 days packed with programming, with more than 290 participants from 60 Indigenous communities across the Western Hemisphere. Indigenous artists, professional chefs, musicians, dancers, athletes, and storytellers will demonstrate traditions and teach workshops that are all free to the public. And don't miss all the Indigenous-inspired cuisine, both on the mall and inside the museum at the Mitzitam Native Foods Cafe. The festival will be on the National Mall from June 26th until July 1st. All events are free, and the festival will be open daily from 11 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Learn more at festival.si.edu.
local businesses are the lifeblood of a community. That's why at CityCast, we love introducing you to so many of them. And when it comes to supporting local businesses financially, no other bank does it like Eagle Bank. With both business and personal banking expertise, Eagle Bank has invested in our community for more than 25 years. They know the people, the culture, the history, the challenges, and most importantly, they believe that lifting local businesses and nonprofits lifts everyone who lives here. And isn't that the kind of bank you want behind your business? Become an Eagle Bank business client and you'll partner with a dedicated local banking expert. And because they know our market so well, they also know your customers and your competition and can tailor individual financial products and services that drive results. They're straightforward and transparent, always a phone call away. And they're fast decision makers, so you won't miss out on opportunities. The health of our communities is tied to our businesses, and Eagle Bank believes in doing all they can to keep local businesses soaring.
All right, so Michael, you and one of the guests of our show, Sam Fortier, wrote about the fact that there was this sports economic study that the district wanted to initiate and look over. Is the RFK site actually feasible? Is it a good idea to have a stadium there? How does it impact the city? What did you guys find?
Yeah, so the city announced this last year, and while this was going on, the two major sports teams in the city, the Nats, as well as, I should say, the Caps and Wizards, Capital One Arena and Nationals Park, respectively, were seeking money from the city to upgrade their facilities. And at the same time, DC and the mayor are lightly courting the Commanders with interest in potentially building a new stadium for them at RFK. So part of this debate was, well, how feasible is that? A, how do you pay for it? Do you ask the taxpayers to pay for a new stadium? And then what benefit would that actually bring to the city, especially since compared to, say, a basketball league or a hockey league, where you might get 40 home games, you're getting a handful, maybe 9 a year. So there are concerns about how dark this thing is going to be most of the time. So DC initiates this study to both provide evidence or some type of data around what impact the city's current sports teams have offered surrounding communities, and then some estimates on what a new NFL team and stadium would how that would benefit the city. And what they found was that, and the results may not surprise you here, the city's current sports teams provided a ton of benefit to the community. They said they were looking at factors like development, economic activity, job creation, this metric called economic output. And they said the same would be true for an NFL stadium by and large. It would have tremendous economic benefit. The number, I think, was $1.26 billion a year. But some of that is in contention because these sports studies have been done lots of time, and a lot of economists agree. Usually they sell more than they actually provide once the stadiums are built. And it's just interesting to see how some of the reaction has been, well, is this legitimate or is this just kind of fluff that is buying into a conclusion we already knew the city would have?
Yeah. And I imagine that this is going to be, fought over for a couple of years because obviously stadiums cost money. There are a couple of stadiums that have cost in the billions with a B dollars. One thing I noticed in this report with all of its tables and charts and fancy numbers was, who is paying for this? How many of my tax dollars and of Topher's tax dollars and your tax dollars do we think are going to go to this, if you had to give your guess?
Well, one issue with this study, as it was presented last week, is that initially when the city talked about it, they said a huge component of this is going to be explore this question of what are financing options? What might this look like? How much would taxpayers potentially be asked for, just to discuss what's on the table as far as cost. And the city is not releasing that portion of the study, and they won't say why or if they'll do it. So I imagine there's going to be some efforts to try and extract some more information in that realm. But as of right now, we don't have a ton of data on what specifically this would look like from a financing standpoint.
Topher, I know you're an ANC member, and maybe this is not necessarily your realm of expertise, but when you do some of these economic studies, do you ever release how you guys intend to pay for, say, you have to redo a building or something like that? Is that part of it typically?
I can't say I've had a great deal of experience doing a study, but I also think it's a good argument to say that people who ever did this thing also don't have a great experience doing a study, because I think it's offensive to call this thing a study. I mean, a study suggests some sort of academic endeavor. This was so clearly a route to reach a predetermined conclusion. I've been making this joke that it's a bit like asking the Music Man guy, like, what your budget for trombones and cornets should be. That, like, of course, it's a lot, tons. Yeah, it'll be great, you know. And the fact that the study hired Jack Evans, of all people, to be, you know, at his consultation, and Jack Evans, you know, longtime council member, I think his view of how many sports stadium a city needs is like the N plus rule, where like N is the number you have. So N plus one, rather, N plus one rule, that, you know, N being the number of stadiums you currently have. So he always wants more stadiums. So I think this whole thing is a total sham. And the fact that they can't release the public financing aspect of it is really telling about how bad of a deal it is actually for DC taxpayers. You know, I think any sort of genuine study into sports stadiums always finds that it's never actually worth the cost to the city, particularly when there's public financing.
For sure. I feel like Josh Harris could gain a ton of brownie points if he was like, I will put up $1 billion or something like that, you know? But it's funny that you mentioned that they like don't release it and it's not in good faith, because WUSA 9 actually filed a FOIA request over this, like to get the sense of where do we think this money is going to come from. And the DC government denied this bit about where the money is coming from because they said DC law exempts disclosure of trade secrets and commercial or financial information obtained from outside the government that could result in substantial harm to the competitive position of the city. So, I mean, how many ways, Michael, do we think the government generally could like pay for this besides just saying, Josh Harris, could you fork over $1 billion? DC taxpayers, could you fork over $1 billion? Like, how many routes are there really to funding this thing?
I mean, I'm certainly no expert, but the two options you listed or some combination seems like the traditional ways one would go about this. There's things like kind of tax increment financing and more complicated funding measures. But again, I'm no expert on this. However, it would have been great to see what the city thought might work here and how much, you know, taxpayers might have been asked to pay for in any event.
Yeah, I also wonder, like, because they're competing with Maryland and Virginia to get the Commanders, even though Bazar has been so bullish on it, you know, them saying it's a trade secret, like, I mean, Maryland and Virginia are states. I'm sure there are different levers that they could pull as compared to DC, who's just a city and can't quite finagle it. What do you think about that?
For sure.
Is that part of it?
I mean, I have to imagine the city does not want to show all its cards here as it pertains to its pursuit of the team. So that makes a lot of sense to me, actually. It's very tense as far as who's going to be the winner of this fight over the Commanders. So, yeah, I expect they'll fight to keep that information private.
I think it's really illuminating when you think back to the fight over Virginia taking the Wizards and the Caps. I think that was just a couple months ago, and DC, the city, was putting out these studies that were brilliant about showing how terrible a deal it was for Virginia. And all of a sudden, now they're going to shift course and say, wait a minute. When it's for our stadium, it's okay. It's okay to spend a great deal of public money on this stadium. So I think people are pretty self-serving in this area. So we'll see.
I can't wait until Virginia and Maryland release their own sports economic studies of a similar tenor. I'll be waiting for them. See what they say.
Likewise.
Sure.
Let's be real, lawsuits are not fun, but with Paulson & Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson & Nace is a DC law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. Partner Chris Nace is a local who cares deeply about the DC community, even serving on the board of the local branch of the Living Classrooms Foundation in his free time. Nace and his associates Samantha Peters and Maya Perry handle medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson & Nace has even been recognized as one of U.S. News' best law firms. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson & Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com. That's PAULSONANDNACE.com. Or call 202-463-1999.
Alrighty, so all of you might have noticed that it is hot outside. Hot as Hades. So hot. Not the humidity, not the argument that we get here in the South. It's hot in degrees. I'm moving this week, and boy, did I pick the wrong week to move, because this
Yikes.
week alone We're projected to hit 100 degrees a few times. The same is going to be said for next week, potentially. It's going to be arguably the hottest June on record since like 2016, which is not great. Mayor Bowser's declared a heat emergency. There are cooling centers all across the city. Guys, what do you do to stay cool in these absolutely heinous temperatures?
I mean, I feel like hitting the pool is always a go-to. I live not too far from Banneker in Northwest, and that is always just such a fun environment. Granted, though, a lot of people are probably going to have the same idea.
Yeah, I live feet away from Volta Park Pool and also think it's a great option. I think if you have the ability to get out of town as well, some sort of four wheels to get you out of town, I would also advise that if you can fit it in. I mean, one of my favorite places to go is in the Shenandoah National Park. There's this hike called Rose River Falls, and you start and you go past one waterfall, and then you go along this river, and it ends in Rose River Falls. That is a beautiful little swimming hole. I mean, the water is like 50 degrees, so you've got to be ready for that. But it's a beautiful place to go, and I highly recommend people look it up. Rose River Falls.
That sounds delightful. I mean, typically, I would be taking a long weekend to go to Bethany Beach and just frolicking in the ocean. Unfortunately, that is not in the cards right now. But realistically, because I'm stuck here, I know that there are some things that like people can do. And I feel like every time I'm on the show, I harp about like drink enough water, hydrate or dihydrate. But my God, people, please, please, please drink enough water when it is this hot. And yes, some of the humidity factors in. Your sweat doesn't evaporate as quickly. Basically, your body's temperature regulation gets messed around with. And that means that it can be really dangerous and you can get heat exhaustion, which is really not good. Generally, like what you want to do, as far as I know, Ash in our June guide, I believe, or our May guide, was all about the linen clothes and light and nice fitting clothes. You got to wear some of those. Staying indoors, staying in the AC, going to a pool. I don't have access to a pool, although the Wilson pool is right around the corner, supposedly, but I think it's indoors. So not quite the same vibe I'm going for. There are cooling centers all around the city. There is a map of all of them. I don't know. I honestly just like might walk to the zoo. They have those little like spray thingies and you can just walk through them like 5 times. Just continue to get sprayed on.
Well, this weekend, my daughter's her plan is to get us out to go see Inside Out 2. So, I mean, a big thing being you're inside, air-conditioned, cool place. So that's another good option. Go see a movie.
Yeah. Seems like a great weekend for a movie, I was going to say.
Go see a movie, go to a museum. If you have to be outdoors, like hats, sunscreen, water, ice packs. I have one of my friends has like the fan that like squirts the water in your face too. I feel like it's time to invest in one of those. Right. It might be time. So, unlike a future Commanders stadium, which could cost billions of dollars, and a heat wave that just saps all your energy, I can tell you, our membership program does neither of those things. In fact, I would imagine that said membership program might energize you because you're donating to local news, which is really, really important. Membership program is as little as $8 a month. You can head to membership.citycast.fm, hit us up. You get ad-free listening. No more ads. We love that for you. Also, you get first dibs access to our events. We are planning one with the DC Office of Planning at Metro Bar in July. That Eventbrite is live, and members got first access to that. So if you want that stuff, again, it's membership.citycast.fm. Michael, Topher, thanks again for joining the show.
Thank you, Julie.
It was a pleasure.
And that is all for today on CityCast DC. Our interim executive producers are me, Julia Karen, and Kayla Cote-Stemmerman. Kayla also writes our super informative and fun newsletter, Hey DC. Our interim producers are Ash Durbin, Francisco Kilgore, and Noah Snyderman. And our hosts are Bridget Todd and Michael Schaefer from Politico. Music is by Alex Roldan. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.